Tennis legend Boris Becker has been sentenced to 2.5 years in prison for flouting the deals of his original 2017 bankruptcy case. Now, in a bit of shocking news for the world of tennis and indeed for many fans of the man nicknamed Boom Boom for his massively brilliant serve, Boris Becker will now be having to spend time in jail. Of course, of the 2.5 years, he won't be spending the entirety of it in jail, but it is still quite the fall from grace for a man who was once dubbed Britain's favourite German. Now, what exactly has led to this entire sorry state of affairs that sees the German now set to spend some time in jail? Well, what happened initially, if you cast your mind back 5 years to 2017, was that Becker was declared bankrupt, and the entire thing stemmed from an unpaid loan of his estate in Mallorca in Spain. Now, at that point, Becker admitted that he was embarrassed to have been declared bankrupt, but he also made very clear to the authorities in UK with whom he cooperated that he did not in fact have the money to repay his various debts. At that point, it is worth remembering that he had had prize money, winnings of over 50 million euros, which he said went away in both his divorce as well as due to leading an exorbitantly lavish lifestyle. However, as the authorities dug deeper, they found out that he had in fact been misleading them, and he was convicted in 4 charges under UK's Insolvency Act, whilst being acquitted in over 20 separate charges. So what exactly has he been convicted on? What exactly has led to this? And what is it that he got acquitted from? We are going to go over all of these details right now. So the first thing that we have to note is that he has of course been sentenced to 2.5 years in jail, which includes of course 2 years and 6 months of time that he is supposed to be spending in prison. But under the terms which have been agreed on, he will only be spending half of that term inside jail. The rest of it will be spent presumably in house arrest, but the details, as we know, is that only half of that time will actually be inside a jail cell. Now, the reason that he was sentenced, as I mentioned earlier, was for flouting the terms of his bankruptcy, and as it turns out, the authorities found out that he had been deceiving them, with one of them even saying that he had led them on a bit of a wild goose chase. So what exactly is it that he has been convicted on? What were the major problems? Well, let us see here. So he was found guilty of 4 counts of on the UK Insolvency Act, and among the many things that he was accused of included also hiding Wimbledon trophies as well as other medals. But of those charges, he was acquitted because, well, I guess his counsel made some very good points. But what is it that were the major sticking points? He hid assets worth over 2.5 million pounds from the authorities, and he did so in some pretty nefarious manners. For one, he transferred out 356,000 pounds worth of money to 9 recipients, of which included his ex-wife as well as the mother of one of his children. So he transferred out that money to 9 recipients. It make it seem like he didn't actually have that money, but the interesting part doesn't just end there, as we will see. He also failed to declare the fact that he had assets. He didn't declare that he had a property in his hometown. Now that was also a bit of a problem, because it was he owned this property in Lehman, Germany, which was his hometown. But that wasn't the only thing that he didn't declare, because he didn't reveal the fact that he owned a house. He also hid the fact that he had a bank loan out on that house, which was worth nearly 700,000 pounds, which is the third major thing that he was then accused of not revealing to the authorities. The last thing that he did not reveal to the authorities, which is also very important, is that he had owned shares. In fact, he owned 75,000 shares in the company Breaking Data Corp. Now, he didn't declare the fact that he owned those shares, and thus, if he had declared that, those shares would have doubtless been used to pay off some of his liabilities. So these are the major things, these are among the major things that he didn't declare. So he was found guilty on 4 counts in the UK Insolvency Act, and will now be, as I said, serving 2.5 years of jail time. And it is indeed quite the fall from grace for a man who has not only been a world favorite, or not only been a favorite in UK, but has also been someone who was a great favorite amongst tennis watchers around the world. Not only was he a very good player in his prime, he also had a very colorful personality that endeared him to many, even those who didn't necessarily follow the sport. However, this represents a massive fall from grace in the public eye, simply because, as it turns out, he had been misleading authorities through this all along, and that is not a good look, come what may. It would have been one thing if he didn't actually have the money to pay and had to be declared insolvent or bankrupt, but in this case, he actually did have the money. And it is also worth noting that Becker didn't really stay out of the public limelight. He, as we've mentioned, did in fact have some money due to business ownerships. He was also at one time the coach of Novak Djokovic. And besides that, it is also worth noting that this is not the first time that he has been convicted of some degree of fraud when it comes to taxes. In 2002, the German authorities also found him guilty of evading tax because he declared that he was a citizen of Monaco, which, as we know, has a 0% income tax, but it turned out that he had been living in Germany all along. Therefore, he was actually due to pay tax, and since then, in 2002 he was convicted of that, and since 2012 onwards has been living in London, where 5 years later it turned out that he was supposedly bankrupt. However, as we now know, that wasn't really the case. He hid things from the authorities. As a result, he will be doing time in jail. Now, if you enjoyed this explainer, I would recommend that you like this video, comment on it, share it with your friends. I thank you all very much for joining me on this particular explainer, where we talk about how Boris Becker almost managed to scam the UK authorities but was caught out in the end. So thank you all for joining us. I appreciate the fact that you have joined me on this particular live. I'm Shane Dias, and as always, I will see you guys very soon with more such breaking news features, explainers, and everything else in between.